Oh yeah, we're doing it.
We're starting.
We're talking movies. Movies. Some of them are good and some are not.
Most are not.
Movies.
Yeah.
We gotta have a theme song. Doing movies. Sexy time with Kyle and Ben. Movie time.
I could do a bass line to that. Yeah.
You can watch it on YouTube or go to thedeadreckoner.com and subscribe to my Substack. You can listen and not see. Okay, that's good.
Nice.
We're talking movies. We got The Legend of Grindelwald and Secrets of Nim.
Well, Crimes of Grindelwald was the last one. So we're doing Secrets of Dumbledore.
Secrets of Dumbledore.
You're right, Secrets of Nim. Yeah.
Secrets, they're secrets, man. I'm still not sure what they are, and I watched the movie. So, but there are secrets.
Sexual secrets.
I mean, it's not that secret.
Well, it's also the idea that they were pulling off. Did you ever watch Community, the heist episode where they confuse him with the briefcases?
Oh yeah, they do a briefcase. They do a briefcase gag.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're doing that, and then we're talking about Paris, 13th District, aka Les Olympiades.
Les Olympiades.
But I guess we should talk about Grindelwald first.
Sure, if we must. I mean, that's the big one out.
But we will spoil all these movies. We will spoil them for you. You will be spoiled rotten by our insights.
Free flow thought. So yeah, we're trying
free
to
flow. We get it. What are we gonna do? Slam poetry here?
Yeah, slam poetry.
Bebop, scat.
Stream of consciousness.
Grindelwald. Is he bald? No. He's got hair up there, up top, on his head. He likes to fuck dudes.
He does.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We don't see it, but there is some sexual tension with Dumbledore. But otherwise, it's a bore. That's our review, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, it is a bore. I mean, you were one of those people who didn't see the first two.
I have not seen the first two.
Yeah, which are a chore, I will tell you. This one is not as much of a chore because they've learned
It's hard to imagine.
It's hard to imagine, sure.
Although, I mean, there was a great scene of sexual tension at the opening between Jude Law and Mads Mikkelsen.
Two great actors. I mean, when you got Jude Law and Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah, I like these guys. In fact, I don't have a problem with any of the acting.
No.
I find that Eddie Redmayne character to be a little bit like whatever. I mean...
And they toned him down. I mean, he's supposed to be the lead character. And they kind of put him off to the side.
I mean, he's a good actor, and I guess he does what he's supposed to do here as this kind of bumbling, like, nature boy who has to deal with people but doesn't much like it.
It ventures the line of the autistic spectrum in the wizarding world before it was...
Yes, he is definitely supposed to be neuroatypical.
Yeah,
I think we can all agree with that characterization. And in the scene where he does, like, that shimmy thing... is actually funny. I mean, it's one of the few moments that I found.
Surprisingly so. I need to give movies credit where credit is due, and some of the humor has not landed through the series. His physical embodiment and willingness to do that, and especially the countering with the guy who plays his brother, was legitimately enjoyable.
Yeah, that was funny.
I thought that was a segment of the movie that worked. Not many do, but that one did.
Well, and it's a good contrast, and they could have mined it for more comedic stuff because he is so awkward, and the brother's like so suave and debonair, right? That it is a funny contrast. But yeah, I don't fault any of the performances. I mean, I feel like I say this a lot, but I think part of this is because these movies are so not acting driven that you can't really find fault with the actors. Because the problem, you know, they're cast fine, right? And, you know, most of them are just doing what they do, right? I mean, Jude Law is being Jude Law, Mads is being Mads. These roles are very much in their comfort zone.
Very much
right?
so. Very much so.
And they execute them well, and they're excellent screen actors,
yeah,
right? They know how to do whatever it is that this movie's asking them to do.
Obviously, I mean, this character Grindelwald has gone through some notable changes.
Passed through many hands.
I mean, Colin Farrell plays a version he plays Percival something, I forget. But he's
a decoy, right?
He's a decoy, and then he's a disguise, and then at the end of the movie, it turns into Johnny Depp as Grindelwald, and then Johnny Depp's all throughout the second Crimes of Grindelwald. Not a very good movie. Very convoluted. From what I understand from people who love Harry Potter, because I am not. I should put that out there. I'm not obsessed with the lore. I'm not knowledgeable of the lore. But people who are found it to be rather offensive.
Oh no!
So
oh no!
It went down some roads. Fandom scorned. And I mean, J.K. Rowling's interesting.
That's one
subject.
word. That's one word to use for Joe.
Yeah.
Joe, our friend Joe.
She is, I mean, obviously, what a success story it is, to go from poverty and to write a story that, transforms her life, transforms a lot of people's lives. She has a very complicated relationship with the people who love her stories. A lot of people, there's always the theory of death of the author that they can interpret. And
is she dead?
No.
Do we think she's been reanimated?
Once it's been written.
Did they do a Horcrux on her?
No,
Did they do a Cruciatus curse on her?
Something like that. But no, what the death of the author is like where the fandom and they can have their own interpretation.
Yes.
Of where
yes, we're not going to impute to her work.
No.
Yes, no.
But she has used her power and status to change people's perceptions and go back and change things in the book.
Yeah, I mean it's the worst kind of tokenism, right?
Yeah.
Because it didn't even benefit people when it was going on. Like if she'd said Hermione was black at the beginning in the books or before the movies come out, well then you get a black actor on screen, you launch a black actor's career, you have that kind of representation in the movie. But now it's like afterwards she's like, "Oh yeah, Hermione's black. Oh yeah, Dumbledore's gay." Same criticisms, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like you could have done this beforehand. It's the worst kind of like it's almost a parody of like virtue signaling liberal identity politics because you didn't even do the thing, right? Because I believe that representation is important, and I think, and we're going to come to another movie later where I think the diversity and the representation is one of the movie's great strengths, one of its many strengths. Because it feels real and honest and contemporary. Yes, the contemporary world is racially diverse, sexually diverse, and the extent to which you can capture that, you open up new story options, and also you tell the truth. You tell the truth about the world. This is the world we live in. Yeah. But when you come back later and say these things as a kind of sop to people, I just don't. I look at that and I think, like, who is this for? Like, who's happy about this?
Nobody.
Because you didn't. The people who have issues with like woke culture or whatever are going to be pissed. Yeah, which is fine. Piss them off. Yeah. I don't give a shit about them. But like the people who you think you're pandering to, what you can say like, yeah, I made these people in my mind. They were this way. I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. In fact, it's even worse than that because it's like, if you're saying Hermione was black, basically you're saying that the idea of being black is so insignificant that you could write 7 books, make 8 movies with a character who either on the page was never identified as black, on the screen was not black, and that it didn't affect it at all.
No.
That the experience of being black is so insignificant that a character could just be black but not have it come through in any way.
Sure. Yeah.
Which kind of defeats the whole purpose of having diversity, right? Because the idea of diversity is that there is a different life experience that accrues to you that you go through if you're black.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if that weren't the case, then it would be it would have the same significance as whether you've got like attached earlobes or whether your second toe is longer than your first one or whether or not you can roll your tongue. These are all genetic differences that don't seem to affect people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And you're right. Because of that, it comes off as shallow. It comes off as decorative.
I mean, it comes off. I think you're being kind. I think it comes off as
exploitative,
insane. Like you're like, oh yeah, I'm a good liberal. She's black. He's gay. Right? It's just, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's like you're handing out checks to a closed bank account. You're handing out coupons to a closed restaurant. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're not giving people anything significant, anything of substance, right?
And I think, I mean, and this, nothing significant, nothing of substance, I think perfectly encapsulates the stakes of the world that has been created here by J.K. Rowling. You know, a world that is supposed to be, you know, come before what we know in the Harry Potter universe, but is set historically in you know, a parallel to what is an incoming World War and World War II, and the ideas that are functioning around that time historically. I mean, that's what's going on in this one. It's you know, I made a comment to someone. I'm like, basically this has been distilled to the argument that X-Men has, but in a more simplistic and less engaging fashion.
No, this isn't. I mean, it is X-Men in a way.
Yeah, because
right?
it's people with powers or magic versus people who don't.
But what we learn about this, and we've really known this the whole time about Joe and Brits in general. Brits love to fighting Nazis. That's the only, because honestly, if you're British, that's the only thing that everyone feels good about.
Sure.
Now they should feel good about creating the NHS. You know, agree to disagree on that, maybe.
Maybe.
But like, so basically, let's look at the British, right? They had an empire that was terrible, just a settler colonial nightmare, right, for all concerned.
Yeah.
Right. Then they fight the Nazis in World War II. Everyone feels good about that. They survive the Blitz. They do a lot of heroic stuff. And then they're an empire in decline, right? Yeah. Then they're parceling out their empire. They're living in poverty. They do create some social welfare things that I think are good and impressive, but they're not uncontroversially so.
Yeah.
So basically, what is Voldemort? Voldemort's Hitler. Who is Grindelwald? Grindelwald's Hitler. The Nazi imagery here is extremely on the nose, right? I mean, their icon looks Grindelwald. It might as well be a swastika.
But they're not even. And you're right, because maybe it comes from a British sensibility.
They love fighting Nazis. It's the only thing they want to talk about.
Well, yeah, because it breaks down into a really simplistic black and white identity of heroes versus villains. And while that is essentially a lot of heroes' tales, I think, you know, the really getting into the history of Hitler and Germany and understanding what kind of got the populace in an enraged populism, and understanding what the frustrations on the ground were. This movie could have taken a very, and by the way, it's supposed to be a third chapter, although I think that they have moved away from. I think Grindelwald was supposed to win in this movie, but they moved away from that because if this doesn't do well, they can, and not do 4 and 5, they can end it here, sort of.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
in a way.
They wanted to do like an Empire Strikes Back type.
Well, and I think it would have made more sense.
Well, I mean, if they were going to do the 5, this would be the middle, and the middle would be the place that
downer.
you'd have everything.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a downer. It's supposed to be Grindelwald probably wins over the Wizarding World populace in their fear of Muggles, or tapping into maybe a feeling of superiority of Muggles. And I feel like this was a huge missed opportunity, and probably the opportunity that was originally intended, but studio, you know, insecurity, the fact that the last two, I mean, you can blame the last 2 movies that just being underperforming, uninteresting, and now they're put in a situation where they have to like wrap themselves up, not even tightly or neatly. It's just wrapping it up so that potentially we can save some money going forward. And so that just discourages and annihilates any sort of creative honesty. Yeah. And so this feels so inert. It feels so safe. And because of that, it's distilled very simply, and it's very aggravating to watch, because I actually like some of the characters. I like Dan Fogler as this Muggle who gets caught up in this world. I like him. You know, I think his attraction with a very attractive wizard or witch is Queenie is a little unbelievable at times, but that's what makes it kind of sweet. Like, it makes it kind of endearing. I still feel like he should have been the lead character of this entire series. You know, a Muggle gets caught up in the kind of weirdness of of a magic world that is unbeknownst to him, because Newt is quirky and eccentric, and I liked Eddie Redmayne. Again, they kind of underwrote his character for this movie. They completely took out his love interest, Catherine Waterston, who's also a great actress. The capability and the possibility of this franchise seems as though it has dwindled away from their hands, and that the whole concept of it being about fantastic beasts and this world of lore and mythology, it has deviated back to what is comfortable for this franchise, and it's very troublesome to me.
But here's the thing. You use the word distill, and I think distillation is a good way to think of what this movie is. Because it's got some of the same things that are good and bad about it as all the Harry Potter stuff does.
Yeah.
But the Harry Potter stuff has one thing, which is that the core of it is those three characters and their relationship.
Absolutely.
So it's about young people overcoming adversity, loving their friends, believing in it. That's E.T., that's the Goonies, that's a lot of stories. So the movie had a core of likable characters who had a consistent, coherent story.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? And what your point is that this movie lacks that. It's too many characters, too many ideas about who the movie should be about.
Yeah.
Right? And it never coheres. And so, because it does have the good thing, like, the world building visually is good. Like, I always think about the Harry Potter movies, like, I want to go into that world. Like, that would be cool. I would hang out in this world. It looks good. It looks interesting.
Yeah.
And it has all the problems. Like, the magic system is totally ad hoc. It never makes any sense. It's never clear why they can do some things and not do other things.
Exactly. And some of the lore is, like, apparently this introduction to this animal that's at the center of the movie.
That's the perfect example.
Has never been a part of the franchise or has been a part of the lore until this moment, but apparently everybody knows this animal. Everybody knows the mythology. Everybody knows how the rules work, but they're making it up as they go along.
But it's definitely made up as it goes along, and it doesn't cohere, right? Because you're like, well, if they had this thing, they would have had it in the future. Why wouldn't they have used it? She clearly was making up the sort of magical system as she goes along. It's never made sense. Yeah. It's never made sense why something worked at one point. Why didn't you use at this point? That would have done a lot then, right? It just doesn't work.
No,
it doesn't work. A lot of it doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense, and it lends credence to your theory that this should have been a down ending, because the way that they resolve the conflict is with this MacGuffin that they then make into, like, the whole movie.
Yep.
Like, so you're telling me. Right, this is what you're telling me I'm supposed to believe. That this entire wizarding world, which is torn asunder, divided, insane, like, violently attacking each other, that, like, based on this one animal, they're all going to cohere around one or another.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Because this animal allegedly can see into the soul of people and knows who the good person is.
The purity of heart.
Who's the pure of heart. It just that's the thing, is, like, you don't know what you're doing, so you come up with a way to resolve the conflict, but it's so unsatisfying.
Oh, yeah.
It's so ad hoc. It's so pro forma.
Oh, yeah.
That, like,
pro forma's good.
It's like, you literally, and the movie has that feeling of just being on rails.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're just like, well, this is what's going to happen, so here's how we're going to get there.
Well, and the whole movie, the whole premise of this one is that it is a con and heist movie, which I've been watching a lot of them as of right now, and it was so lazily done. I couldn't even believe it that it's this idea that Grindelwald can see into the future, therefore the only way to counteract it, this is the whole premise of the movie, 2.5 hours of it, is to confuse Grindelwald with randomness. And that's what it is. It's just, it's chaos and randomness and silly things. And I'm going, well, what good is the future sight?
Thing is, they don't lean into that enough.
They don't.
Like, I actually like that premise.
Sure.
But, like, the movie doesn't have the sophistication to do something where it literally is like, we're gonna muddy this up.
No, you're right.
Because that could have been, like, fun and funny and jaunty.
You're right. It's done in the laziest way possible. It's done in the least inventive way possible. And then when it culminates to this idea that they have multiple briefcases, multiple suitcases, the replication of Newt's little magical world within it, almost Doctor Who magical world in it. It's so obvious who has it because the movie doesn't involve the character who has potentially one of the briefcases. And so emotional moments that are supposed to be Newt thinks he's got it and that his world, they don't resonate, they don't have impact because you are so inoculated from being involved. Like, you are just not a part of this. And watching it all unfold in such pageantry and not with intent or narrative vigor or fun, as you used a good word, because it's supposed to be fun. That concept is supposed to be fun, and it just felt prescribed, easy, and lazy. And it was, what a real bummer it is.
Yeah, well, and it's because, and this goes back to like some of our conversations about Marvel movies and stuff like that. They always raise the stakes so high that the tone becomes leaden, which then sucks the fun out of it.
Yeah.
Because, like, you could, like, a caper movie, like a true caper movie in the middle of the Harry Potter universe is a good idea. That's a good idea for a movie. Yeah. Like, you could make a really fun movie.
How you use magic within the limitations. How do you distract? How do you... I mean, the whole thing about it being a three-card Monty game, but it exacerbated. It's simpler than 3-card Monty. Like, it doesn't even get to a level beyond. You don't need to do a
sleight of hand, right?
Yeah, you don't even need to do that.
But I mean, like, think about like one scene that I did find at least somewhat enjoyable. The scene where they pretend that he's doing the Muggle's doing the magic, but it's like
also a decent scene,
like that's
visually too.
And he sells it. He's like, I'm doing this shit, you know. It's great. It works. It's fun. If the movie is like that, it's a fun movie. Yeah, right.
Even on a visual aesthetic, I actually liked its use of visual effects in that sequence, even to its ultimate conclusion where she's thrown the books and the papers and it creates this kind of like bridge of books that they're like crossing in slow motion to each other. I thought it was captivating in a visual sense, but there's something missing. You're right, the cohesion, the connective tissue to these sequences, because Newt getting his brother is a good sequence. The monster in that is interesting, how they're moving, it's got a blend of comedy, and I actually, you feel a bit of tension because of what this creature is doing. Like, it invites you into the otherworldliness of it very nicely. The idea that a Muggle is pretending to use magic, or they're making it the illusion that he's using magic and trying to trick the villain. Also, on a separateness, is a good idea and unfolds, visually in a visual capable way. But and even like such sequences between like Jude Law and Ezra Miller, who they've clearly, Warner Brothers has already tried to distance itself from Ezra Miller, like writing this character as though he's dying and like really speeding up the process that he should not be part of this world any longer. It is uncomfortable and weird how they're going about it. But he's got a visual set piece where he's fighting Ezra Miller in a kind of strange things other world. I mean, he does it with Grindelwald too, which is another thing that doesn't really happen. I can't remember if it happens in the original Harry Potter series, but visually there's some interesting things going on, some like individual character things that are happening, but they don't connect very well. The narrative slows, and because of that, anything that is visually capable or interesting becomes mundane. The characters become uninteresting because nothing feels like it's really building together, and it's just a disappointing conclusion for this movie, if it is a final conclusion. But ultimately, it's just a disappointing entity because nothing feels as though it brings itself together nicely, and it's troubling.
Well, here's a quick sort of philosophical conversation, right? Because I think this is interesting. It's not really philosophical. It's about cinema generally.
Sure.
Like, I feel like we see this happening so much in this era of pre-sold franchises, where you have someone who has an idea, whether it's Stan Lee or J.K. Rowling or George Lucas or whatever. And there is something captivating and electric about that idea that pulls people in, that creates these huge fandoms, right? Of people, and this hunger for more content, right? And when we were younger, for whatever reason, it didn't coalesce. Like, they went a long time between making, Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace, right?
It's a long time,
and
yeah.
presumably they could have been making more Star Wars movies, but for whatever reason they didn't.
No,
right?
A lot of books, a lot of
a lot of
grassroots involvement in creating new stories for the Star Wars universe that a lot of people participated in, that George Lucas signed off. That's where it really found itself. I mean, there was an IP, but it was for literature, it was for card games, toys, but not. You're right, not for the continuation of the franchise.
And then at some point around the turn of the millennia, everyone sort of realized all at once, I guess, that like this is where it was at. Mm-hmm. The pre-sold franchise was where it was at, and we've seen these properties used and reused and recycled with pretty obviously diminishing returns in almost every case. I really can't.
Yeah.
I mean, the Marvel stuff is a little more variegated, right? But I mean, some of the best stuff has come from things within the franchise that weren't pre-sold, right?
Yeah.
Like Guardians of the Galaxy, nobody knew who that was.
No.
I mean, not nobody, but right. It wasn't like
It wasn't the most popular.
It wasn't like a household name.
That was
right?
definitely a rarity amongst the fandom.
So, I guess like, why do we think this is? I mean, I think there are a couple explanations. One is that these things, as they become more valuable, become properties that, you get too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, definitely so.
Because okay, we're gonna make this movie. It's gonna cost us $150 million. It's worth too much. Everyone gets involved from the CEO on down. And the thing just gets watered down until it's kind of indistinct.
I mean,
right?
You're seeing that in the rumors in the creative room for the Lord of the Rings series for Amazon that Bezos has involved himself, that's troubling to me.
Well, of course.
Why?
I mean, if
why
you,
would that be the case?
If you have, I do think there is a. I mean, people like Bezos clearly think they're very smart.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Well, and arguably he is.
Yeah, but even then, that doesn't mean you can be good at making movies.
No. Oh no. I think there's a distinct difference. He's smart in logistics. He's not smart in creativity.
Yeah, like the ability to. I mean, what is Jeff? Yes, Jeff Bezos clearly is smart in some way. He's also lucky. He got there first, right? When you get there first, you get a lot of advantage, right? Sure. He was the first guy to realize, we need a general store on the internet, and he was the first guy to realize someone needs to build the infrastructure to run the internet on. I mean, that's how he really made, Amazon Web Services is the biggest profit center of that company. So he realized it, and he understands. Yes, he understood something fundamental about. I mean, to me, his great realization is sort of automating everything. Like, his goal is just to automate everything.
Yeah,
he doesn't want to ever have people to talk to each other. Everything is just automated. And he's right. I mean, that's the way of the future, right? Yeah. And he was there first. And when you're there first, you get a lot of advantages. Yeah. Both market advantages and technical advantages. But that doesn't mean he's got to understand what makes a good Lord of the Rings movie.
Absolutely not.
Or series, right?
Yeah.
But first of all, people buy these toys because they want to play with them, right? I mean, there's nothing else to it other than that. And I think that everyone thinks they know better who is that rich and powerful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I do think that there was some, I don't want to romanticize the past, but there certainly was a veneration for at least some creative people that I don't know that exists anymore. Although it exists for some people. I mean, we've talked about, Scorsese getting $200 million to make a movie where $200 million is insane in it for any movie. Yeah. But it's especially insane for the movie he's making.
Absolutely.
But I think that those kind of guys are of a dying breed. I
think so.
I don't know that we're going to see many more people who can operate at that level and get that autonomy.
No, yeah.
I think we're going into an age where the price of autonomy is you're an independent filmmaker.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, if you want to be an independent filmmaker, you'll get autonomy.
Yeah.
If you want to make spectacle, no.
Yeah.
You're going to be part of a very large committee.
And I think what you're tapping into is a real problem with how the business is structured. Is that a lot of risk, and there's a lot of risk into movie making, especially because it is a business, and there is an idea that there should be some sort of profit or money making idea behind pretty much every decision that any movie is made. Like the hope that even an indie, of $1 million budget will make a little bit over that, or hits in the right way.
We all want to succeed.
Well,
right?
and I feel like we've gotten to a point where this sense of risk for new storytelling, which really drove the first wave of blockbusters from Spielberg on, was that we need new material. We need something inventive and something fresh. And we've moved beyond that because now we live in a world of established and widely known IP subcultures that have their own audiences pre-programmed, and it removes any sense of ingenuity,
I think you're
risk,
getting something very important.
And it's a big problem for the health of the movie industry, because if it's always going to be a regurgitation of things that are known based off of a select number assessment based on how many people will go to this particular product because of the knowledge of its IP identity, we need more IP. We need more creation. We need more things. There's value in risk. There's value in those things. But we've gotten to a point where they're only willing to. There's a safety and security idea with how much money can be made in these things, and that's why they put $300 million into Avengers or a Marvel movie, and nothing into a mid-budget range. We're missing a mid-budget. Creative
that's because that's where the risk is, right? I mean, with if they don't spend anything, it's like whatever.
Yeah.
And if they spend a lot, well, it's going to be on something they know will make it back because they can already sort of plot that out, right?
We're actually going into a weekend. We'll talk about it next week, but we're going into a weekend with a mid-budget epic that's coming out. Is The Northman, Robert Eggers. That's a huge risk.
Yeah.
It is fascinating to me that he was able to get it and to get that kind of money. I think it's $80-90 million.
It's nuts that that's considered mid-budget.
You're right, because like Scott Pilgrim was 60 million was a mid-budget range. But you're right. That is still an exorbitant amount of money. Where are the 30 million concepts of interesting characters that people will create their other new worlds and fandoms for? That there's a lot of missed opportunities here, but that's because we have bulldozed them. We have put them into the category of unwilling to risk it, and that's depressing.
Yeah, I think you're getting at something really important, because when you think about investing in a movie, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you could invest in a person, right? That's kind of the old auteur idea, like you're a genius. Go make your thing.
Yeah. And I would put Robert Eggers.
Here's X amount of money, right? You could invest in an idea, right? Like this is a good, this is a great script. This is a great concept. Let's make this. But when you invest in an IP, right, a brand, a whole different set of logic starts to move in, right? Which is why the rise of IP-based movie making has coincided with the media consolidation and movie companies becoming parts of media empires, right? Because business people understand brands.
Yep.
Right? And at that point, your concern is to protect the brand, right? What can we do to advance the brand? So with a Marvel movie, what can we do to make sure they'll see the next movie? What can we do to make sure that our universe continues to pump out content? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, we've had this conversation about Black Panther before. The end of Black Panther is so dissatisfying because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't resonate. And it happens because they need the people in Wakanda to be ready for the next movie. Yep. Right?
Yeah.
So they resolve this very deep and difficult conflict very quickly and neatly because they needed to move to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Right? So once you start to operate from that premise, the logic of storytelling is out the window.
Yeah.
Right? Storytelling is just a necessary evil to keep the money machine printing.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a new phenomenon.
I think you're
That's
right.
That's a new phenomenon, right? Because it sees these things as modular components of a very large strategy, right? And I mean, we do have, Star Wars to thank for this, because Star Wars is the thing I think that really gave rise to the idea that merchandising was big, which is kind of the beginning.
That was a big transition.
Which is kind of the beginning, that a movie could make money in all these ways that didn't have anything to do with the box office or rental market or
I'm forgetting the film school term, but it's like vertical something
yeah,
or other.
yeah.
I'm forgetting.
Vertical integration or something
there it is.
like that.
Yeah,
well, that's a business idea too,
yeah.
right? It's like this thing is a thing that can make money for you in all kinds of ways that you hadn't conceived of.
Yeah.
And we've seen that just explode, right? With the market and everything from toys to t-shirts to, do you sell it streaming? Do you sell it pay-per-view? How do you make... Like, people are looking just for how to squeeze so much money out of these things.
Yeah.
And when that's your concern, the whole thing changes, right?
I agree.
Because it becomes Marvel or Star Wars or the wizarding world of Harry Potter or whatever become these platform, theme park attractions, right? They become these platforms upon which you can just build all these things and make all this money.
Yeah.
Right? But of course that's always going to take you away from the spark of whatever was magical about the original thing.
I agree, because why I grew up and loved Star Wars, it had a magic. It had a creative ingenuity, a organic and believable new world that immersed me, and I wanted to know everything about it. I wanted to live in. You're right. I wanted to live in that world. And we can even talk about how Harry Potter makes you feel that way, but I think Harry Potter made you initially feel that way, and they assume there's an assumption that you want to be part of these worlds, so they don't necessarily need to give it the magic.
I don't think they're assuming it. I think the numbers often prove them right. Like, even though this movie might underperform by whatever their projection was, it'll still make a lot more money than it would if it was not associated with a pre-sold franchise.
I agree.
So, I mean, the truth is, it doesn't even exist if it's not associated with a pre-sold franchise. So it's hard to perform the thought experiment. But I feel the idea holds in the sense that its existence is predicated on the fact that X number of people will go. I mean, that's what pre-sold franchises are, right? X number of people will see this movie no matter what.
Yes, yeah.
They'll see it just because they see everything in this world.
And most of my depression with it is not...
It's a therapy session here. Welcome to our intervention.
This is my pop culture therapy. My depression for this is generally I see I understand business quite a bit, and while I don't agree with kind of some of the callous decisions of it, the idea of making money and to keep the machine going makes sense to them. A board of directors wants to keep the machine moving, but it's the placation, like the populace who just eagerly goes to these things.
You're angry at the piggies.
They just
go into the trough for slop.
They do. I mean, and I hate to word it that way, but
I worded it that way. You can lay it on me.
There's like the idea that there's so many of these Fast and Furious movies. There's so many that Star Wars has such a robust fandom, even with such disappointing returns. That Wizarding World can still be its kind of thing. Is because people just go see these things, turn their brain off. Marvel's the biggest example of it, that it operates on a level that is mediocre. It just strides right there in the the Sony deviation. But like Disney, Marvel, they've achieved a level of what I think is the most depressing and the hardest to fight against, is that it reaches a level of entertainment enough, that it keeps you tethered and going mindlessly. I think it is mindless. They're movies based for references, for cheer moments, for spectacle, maybe for a couple jokes here and there.
Yeah, they got the formula. They got the formula down.
You follow that formula right to monotony, and because that exists, because Marvel's such a success, I don't think we'll break away from this model in for the studios, for business, for IP generation, because people are locked into it, and that's a model for success. It's worth it if we throw money into this kind of model versus trying to find something new.
You know what? What's funny is, I mean, you could be cynical and still make good shit. Like I was at Disneyland yesterday, and like they were so many of these. They had these new turning red pandas, and there were just so many
That's
of them.
cute.
And I like that movie. That's a good movie. Like
decent movie,
it's not either of our favorite Pixar, but like it's got real creative juice to it. It's an actual movie with actual creative excitement to it, and funny moments and touching moments. And it's all making them a bunch of money. Right? It's all.
I'm glad.
It's making Disney Corp a bunch of money.
Well, and hopefully they see that a new good idea that resonates with some people can also make us money.
Yeah,
that would be nice.
And they're doing a kind of thing there. That kind of animation has to be done by someone big because it's just so expensive and so resource intensive. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's not like a movie where like anyone can make a movie. And even make it look pretty good with the technology out there and a fucking smartphone, right? Not anyone can make a 3D animation of that caliber, and will not. And you know, I mean, maybe someday in the future you'll just be able to have AIs generate all of it.
Maybe
computers will be powerful enough to do it, but that's not the way it is right now. No. So I mean, you can do it. You can make money on this shit and have the shit be good, but it's just, it's not surprising to me. I guess that my final thought is that it's really, when you start thinking about it, it's pretty overdetermined, right?
Yeah,
because
it is.
Because they're right? They're protecting the brand, and when your money making is based on a brand, that's right. You have to protect the brand. That's the way you make money. Is the brand is strong.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, in my way of maybe concluding this talk, I would just like to say, so with in relation to how the brand is what dictates it, you can see evidence of that in this movie alone. How it robs it of all of its opportunity and potential. And most notably, I really did like the addition. I like Jude Law as Dumbledore, even though I think it should have been Jared Harris, personally, because I think that would have just been lovely and nice. But he has a similar look. He's just not as good looking as Jude Law.
You are.
That's who you are. But I also, like Mads Mikkelsen, and his sinister ability gave some gravitas to a villain that this series was missing. But the movie underwrites it because and this might be a Rowling thing, most probably likely a Rowling thing, is to put it into such, prescribed black and white villain versus heroes ideas, and it's because the brand dictates it. The brand requires it. And this idea that I thought he was a charming enough, good-looking enough, interesting enough villain that I think ending it on a downer where he sells the idea of a split between the wizarding world, where a war is about to come and split this world. It has historical resonance, and it would have a parallel to the idea of Nazi Germany within a world that was sort of separated from it. And I thought that would have given this movie a lot of power. But the brand requires pretty simplistic adventurism, and it does not require very complex notions of complicity in history and complicity in violence that I feel has that this is where we get a wasted opportunity, is that because the brand dictates something very familiar, we lose out on the potential.
Well, and there's an even more specific case of that, right? Because the movie is teasing and promising something that will problematize Dumbledore.
Yes.
And the movie does the exact opposite.
Yes.
It venerates him to an even higher extent.
Absolutely.
Which is nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what kind of a lame bait and switch is that to say, oh, we're going to make it more interesting? Nope.
Nope. You're right. It's a betrayal. Oops. It's a betrayal of what the movie was. I guess the reveal is that he once loved a guy who ended up being a bad guy. Yeah.
Now he's trying to destroy him.
Sure.
So that's real. I mean, it's just, that's the fucking title of the movie. And yes, problematizing a beloved character would be interesting, but that's not what you do.
No,
You do the exact opposite.
He's the purest of heart.
He is. He's so pure. He turns down the power.
Yeah, exactly.
Right at the end, which is just like, okay.
Yeah,
great.
We get it. Anyway,
yeah, we get. He's the best ever. He's so great.
Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore. I don't think we recommend it to anybody beyond if you want to suffer through the continuation of this series. I actually have not.
We should do like a 20-minute supercut of what's good in it.
I know exactly. I haven't really met anybody who loves this series, so if you are out there, I am actually curious to hear it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? Because the fans don't, the Harry Potter fans don't like it for, a mix of cinematic and just like nerdy fan reasons.
Yeah, nerdy fan reasons.
And I don't think it's pulling anyone new in.
I don't think so.
Right?
No. Yeah,
or even appealing to like, casual Harry Potter fans. I guess that's as much as I could be. I've seen the movies. I've read some of the books. But anyways, I like the theme park attractions.
Sure.
Let's talk about Paris 13th District, aka Les Olympiades. Actually, it's really Les Olympiades, aka Paris District 13 or 13th District.
Yeah, it's Jacques Audiard, who's a very, very good French filmmaker.
This is my first of his movies.
So he's done A Prophet, which is great. I think
I gotta watch. I'm gonna go back because I think
I own
it. Spoiler alert, I love this movie. I thought this movie was spectacular.
As I was watching it, I knew you would love it. I knew you would love it.
Well, it's very much up my alley.
Absolutely.
Well, how did you feel about it?
No, I think it is a very well done movie. It's not my favorite of his. A Prophet is incredible, but it's a crime movie, and that's right up my alley. I like that.
Yeah, this is my kind of movie.
He did a romance film that was very bizarre with Marion Cotillard. I think it was Matthias Schoenaerts. I think. It was called Rust and Bone. That was really powerful. That was a really powerful work. I really like that. And this is more understated. He does go for some very pronounced histrionics, but I think in a Hollywoodized sense, he's got a Hollywood sensibility for French filmmaking, which I really like because they're palatable and they're familiar in how he approaches genre pictures.
Yeah, he can definitely work both sides of the street. It's a very French movie, but it has a, he does it. He can also lean into like stylized moments that are a little, that divert a little bit from the kind of more naturalistic thing he's otherwise going for.
But I liked this movie. I liked its. This is not a movie that's going to, like, when you watch it, it's not going to wow you in like in any kind of filmic sense. It's not going to catch you off guard. It's really a movie that I think maybe this is why I knew it was going to be a kind of movie you loved. You have to kind of sit in its rhythm. And it is very fluid in these characters. Gets really intimate in the kind of dynamics that they are in their sexuality, their intimacy, their insecurity is a big thing about this movie. And so it's this portrait of the 13th district of Paris, if you will, but it's these characters who intertwine in sexuality and conversation and understanding of each other that is unassuming and very subtle, and with that very beautiful. And yes. I did like this movie quite a bit.
Yes, based apparently on a few graphic novels or works by Adrian Thoman, who I've never read any of his stuff, but you've probably seen his work. Appears a lot in the New York Times, the New Yorker. He has a very sort of clean line style that is that I like. It's very appealing, and now I'm gonna have to go read some of these books because I liked the movie so much. I love this movie. This movie has several things that are big things for me. One, there's a lot of fucking in the movie.
As soon as the second sex scene happened, I was like, "Oh, Ben's gonna love this movie."
I think that, and the people are attractive, but not in a ridiculous way. Like they look. They're hot, but they look like real people.
Attainably attractive.
Well, I would say attainably. I would just say that they look. They look. The sex scenes are good. They're well shot. They feel real. They don't feel ridiculous.
No.
Right, or over the top.
You're right. There is a personability in the sex scenes where it is sexy. It's sexual. but it seems grounded and real, which you don't get a lot in movies.
Yeah, no, it's not, and some of them go well, and some of them go not as well.
Some of them are awkward.
Some of them are awkward.
Yeah.
Some of them look really good. Right? I mean, it's so there's a lot of sex in the movie. There's a lot of naked people in the movie. This is a big thing for me. I like that a lot. And another thing that the movie does, and I have a very soft spot for movies like this, is that I think it is a very honest and realistic portrait of romantic and erotic love.
Sure.
Where a lot of different things happen, a lot of things kind of stop and start and go off in one direction, go off in another direction, come back together. The movie resonated with me as a pretty honest portrayal of love and sex and relationships for people who are kind of in that awkward state of adulthood where they're not young anymore, they're not exactly old, they're trying to figure things out, right? That to me is movies that can capture that. I am always very into, because I think that this movie really does a great job of being honest and unpredictable without being without relying on a lot of things that seem really crazy or out of place.
Yeah.
The only thing that I initially was resistant to was we should get the characters' names, right? Because
I'll bring them up.
because I don't.
Nora is one of them. I remember that.
No, yes, Nora. So I mean, basically, it's Nora. It's Camille is the gentleman, and
Emily Fong,
Amelie or Emily.
Amelie.
I mean, it's really those three characters, right? Are the main three characters in the movie. And so about halfway through the movie, when we get introduced to Nora, she is mistaken for a cam girl.
Yes.
And
which that took me a while to figure out. I'm like, is she the cam girl? Is she mistaken?
Well, it's ambiguous, right? That's a nice thing. Is there's the movie. That's another thing I think the movie does really well. Is it kind of doles out its reveals in very sorts of interesting and I think effective way.
Yeah.
Especially with this character, right? Who. Like, initially, I was a bit resistant to what happened to her because her reaction basically seemed a little outsized to me. Like,
sure.
She goes back to school. She's in her early 30s. She goes back to do a law degree at the Sorbonne, I think it is. And she's in a criminal law class. She meets some friends. They're
not friends. That was the weird, not weirdest as in not believable, but weird that I felt it was one of the more written pieces where she starts talking with this young girl, and the young girl basically is like, "You're too old to be at school."
I mean, if the movie has one weakness, I do think like the way that sequence plays out feels a little bit forced in the way that basically no other. You know, it feels a little promising young woman in the middle, whereas the rest of it feels very not forced to me.
Absolutely.
Because basically she goes to a party, it's going well for her for a moment. She puts on a blonde wig and kind of a sexy outfit. She's dancing with these girls. She's having fun. Then one of the people there mistakes her for a cam girl that we've already seen.
Yeah.
And
the only sequence in color,
right? And who's like made a video for one of their friends, and basically they approach her. One guy says he wants to come in her face or whatever out of nowhere. She leaves. She's upset.
Which I have to say, it was funny. I was like, even if she was the cam girl, it does not invite. It is interesting, the dynamics of sexuality in our culture, and that when someone is promiscuous or seen to be promiscuous, or a large extent of sexuality, like on the wide spectrum, in the extreme, that you feel the need. I mean, people will say things like,
"Oh
that
yeah, absolutely,"
it's disgusting, and it's wild to me that people think that they have a welcomed atmosphere to do such a thing.
Well, yeah, she's dancing with him, and he's alone. Yeah, they assume. Because he believes her to be a sex worker, he then believes that it's acceptable to do this,
to talk to her like a sex worker, even if she's not on the job.
And she turns out is not a sex worker.
Yeah.
Right. So she's not prepared or as prepared. Although I mean, in clubs, women get fucked up things said to them all the time. and she slaps him, and then she walks away. She's very upset, like even if they're not perceived to be sex workers. But then, and so I think like, and then she's in class, and they're all sort of. Honestly, the one thing that that rang a little untrue for me was like the extent to which the classroom like erupted with everybody tittering.
Yeah,
that's the one thing.
Everything, everybody, every phone. It was pretty.
I mean that seemed forced to me.
But you could also maybe interpret that's how she felt.
That's true, and I'm not saying that like that process wouldn't happen, but the idea that it would happen all at once in one class while she's talking. Yeah, like if I found out I was in a class when I was in college or at law school with a porn star, I certainly would have been interested in that. I'm not claiming that I'm like, I'm not claiming that I'm so good a person that like I wouldn't be like, ooh, that's whoa, like I would never claim that. I don't think I could. I think I'd be interested now, and when I was in my 20s, I certainly would have been like, oh, that's something. But the idea that we would like all find out at once and all start like giggling to each other in class while that person was talking. It's
a little fantastical.
I didn't think that didn't quite resonate for me. But ultimately, the way they unravel her story is very realistic and very affecting.
I agree.
Because it ends up, you slowly get the sense that she's someone who suffered some trauma. You find out what that trauma is, and you sort of see how that plays out in her life in terms of her sex life and her relationships. And that is interesting. Mm-hmm. And that works. So the movie lost me a little bit at that one. Not lost me is too strong, but I was like, this isn't as naturalistic, and it doesn't feel as realistic as everything else I've seen so far.
How the movie opens is different. They open with a relationship between Camille and Amélie, which is that's the first half hour of the movie. It is just. Man applies for a roommate position, and he turns out to be a man. That's not what was desired by Amélie. She wanted a female roommate.
And his name is Camille, which I guess is perhaps a unisex name in French. But maybe more gendered female because she seems surprised. Well, and their budding roommate...
friends with benefits, the blurring of the lines between living with one another. That's how the movie opens, so it's very grounded. The dialogue is very rooted in kind of an honesty of their sexuality. The aspects of their jealousy or their attempts for ambivalence in their relationship has kind of an interesting dynamic where every decision that is made by these characters feels as though it is a subversion of the kind of Hollywoodized idea of sexuality in these relationships, and I found it to be so realistic that once it entered the brief moment of introduction for Nora, it did seem a bit fantastical, or at least a little bit exaggerated. But again, I can definitely see the intent being that that's how she felt, and it felt overwhelming, and it felt unwelcome, and
and those characters are so realistic and so well drawn and well conceived, right? Because they are interesting and dynamic and very three-dimensional in ways that are very believable, right? Because you basically have a woman in Amélie who seems a little groundless and who seems kind of adrift.
Yeah.
But in the end, it ends up being probably the most mature person in the movie. In ways
she knows who she is.
She knows who she is, and she's very clear on it. And then you confront her with a guy who is charming and friendly and kind, but also a bit distant and a bit of a sort of classic intellectual type who kind of can't really deal with his feelings. Like, can't even articulate his feelings.
Can't articulate his feelings. He's also vying for not necessarily status, but he's doing the grind of society, and he is sacrificing the honesty of his person for that, going into real estate, getting deviated from his doctorate. He's trying to make life work and sacrificing that, and he can't, allowing things or vulnerability in. You can see the hesitancy, and he wants to be in a relationship where he can define things for himself.
And you know what this movie knows really well how to do is to put characters in situations that are dramatically interesting but also revealing.
Yes.
Right? Like the scene with his sister is really great.
Great.
Right? Where they're sitting around, they're having lunch together. It's him, his sister, and his dad. And she's talking about how she's like 16, and she's talking about how she's starting to do stand-up comedy. And he just kind of launches into this exegesis of what he doesn't like about stand-up comedy generally. He doesn't say, he's not supportive of her, and he doesn't even inquire into what specifically her material is. He just says that he thinks stand-up comedy kind of is beneath him in a very sort of condescending way.
Absolutely.
And she gets upset, and the dad gets angry and basically calls him out. He said, the way it was translated was fuddy-duddy. You're becoming a young fuddy-duddy. I don't know how good or bad a translation that is from the French, but the idea certainly comes across. Like, you have this father who is recently widowed, who just goes straight to the heart of it and calls him out for exactly the correct reason, which is that, like, when someone comes to you and says this and they're a kid, you're supposed to be like, oh, that's awesome, tell me more.
They're being judgmental.
That's the only appropriate response. He's like, well, you asked for my opinion. I mean, he literally does the I'm just being honest thing.
Yeah.
When it's like, you're confused. It's funny because you're this philosophical guy, but you're confused about virtue.
Yeah.
Because you think that virtue is honesty, when in this case it would have been, the honesty you should have drawn on is an honest love for your sister and a desire to make her feel good. The 16-year-old girl who stutters and who just lost her mom, show interest, show love. Yeah. But no, it's like, you asked for my opinion, I'm giving it to you.
Well, because he might be reacting to the mom's death, or this is just how he has perceived. He's closed off. He's closed off from being honest with how he's feeling, and so he retracts when he's becoming vulnerable, or they're getting more of a hand in the relationship. When Amelie is like servicing and she's got more of a hand, he retracts to have power, to have control. And the dynamic with his sister, he really only has like 2 scenes with her, but it shows perfectly that this movie understands character, that it understands how to showcase it efficiently and memorably and impactfully. Is that the second scene with his sister, she's sharing some of the stand-up material, but then he realizes she has an openness with their father, that he's dating, that she's met this woman, that she has stand-up material. She knows so much that she has potential stand-up material about their dad's sexuality. And he doesn't want to talk about it. He wants to close off. He becomes uncomfortable. He becomes insecure. And it showcases exactly the problem that he has in all of the relationships that he ventures. Whether it is with Nora, whether it is with Amelie, he's closed off. He's unsure, and he's unwilling to give himself, and that is essentially the problem. I mean, and that's the arc, isn't it? Like, it has to have him culminate to give himself, to admit.
But it's so great about how confident a piece of filmmaking and storytelling it is, because that's the arc. He goes from being unwilling and closed off to being maybe willing and maybe a little less closed off. That's the whole movie for him, and that level of development is the perfect amount, because it's believable, it's honest, it doesn't require some tremendous change, it doesn't require some tremendous come to Jesus moment. I mean, basically the triumph at the end of the movie is like, these 2 people are going to give it a shot.
Yes.
That's all that is. It's not that they're in love forever, they don't get married, they don't run off together. It's like, we're going to give it a run.
A genuine shot. Which is what Amelie deserved, as a character. I mean, she is such a fascinating firecracker of a character. Someone who is, again, seen as immature, seen as though life is not together, and yet is the one who is having the devastating relationship of going to see her grandmother and Alzheimer's and dementia, and is putting herself out there, is trying to, articulate herself and be honest with herself, and she sings, she dances at her job, she's constantly evoking her feelings and saying what she wants. And honestly, that gets a lot. I like what the portrait they're painting is, that sometimes you don't have genuine relationships, or things don't work out because you're closed off, and sometimes it's because you are willing to put yourself out there more so than the other person. And that is the dynamic that they showcase in this movie, that they represent.
But she's more mature throughout, and she is the one who ultimately gets to maturity first, right? Because she's the one who said, let's fish or cut bait.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I do love you, and being with you in this way, like, being with you but not being together with you is painful for me.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to do it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's very mature, right? To say, like, this is where I'm at. This is how I feel. You got to make your decision. Go ahead and make it. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And, take it or leave it, right? That's very mature, right? And she gets there first.
Yeah.
Not the intellectual, somewhat successful, Camille.
No.
She gets there.
Yeah.
And she forces him to get there. And he gets there through that and through this other relationship with Nora, whose ending is weirder and more ambiguous, but also very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, Nora's storyline.
Because I think it's very... Whereas I think that we get clarity for Camille and Amelie.
Yes.
Not in the sense that we think, they're going to love each other forever, get together, but they've matured to the point where they're like, okay, we're going to try to have a real relationship with each other.
Whatever binded them and whatever the attraction was can now actually have a way forward, because he was not mature enough or capable enough of willing to admit and be vulnerable to that feeling. So he had to retract and find control into a different relationship. So you're right. That has more of a finite and understood arc for those two characters where they culminate. Nora is more interesting. Nora is a very strange storyline, because it becomes... basically, she starts venturing a personal, intimate relationship with the cam girl she got confused with. And it's because, I think Nora, and you can see it through the insecurity she has with Camille in dating him, that she finds herself either sexually boring or hesitant.
Well, she's deeply traumatized, right? I mean, basically, it's revealed in a... I thought, once again, a very effective and kind of, it almost comes like very quickly and kind of goes away. But it's very good. I think the movie does a good job of looking at someone who's experienced the trauma, and that they're kind of wrestling with it, but not in a way that's like, this happened to me. I mean, she doesn't want to talk about it. She's avoiding it. But it kind of is infusing every aspect of her life. I mean, she was basically in a long-term sexual relationship with her uncle.
Yes.
Right.
Married in uncle, just so everyone knows that it's not blood incest. It is, but
it's very creepy and unpleasant.
Unpleasant. It's clearly he was like a mentor figure.
Yeah, and she clearly was probably in love with him.
Yeah, at a very young age, and when you're susceptible to it, and her trauma comes out in very subtle, even before that, in very subtle ways, where she and Camille are about to engage in sexual intercourse, and she goes, I don't think I can, because I just can't. It's been a while. And he doesn't press. I do like that Camille is not shown in kind of how we would view a toxic masculine character. I mean, he has some personal troubles, but he's not an archetype or a representation of anything. He is a full-blooded individual. And he reacts to that with kindness, and I think it endears us to Camille. I mean, all these characters do things that are questionable, but we are endeared to them because of their full-blooded humaneness.
Yeah, but it would be such like lame movie shit to have him like be like, that I'm leaving. I mean, there certainly are movies that would do that.
Absolutely.
But this is once again, this is true. This is much truer to life. Like he does. Like, people do what they do for, like, complicated but understandable reasons. Like, why does he say that? Well, part of it is that he don't want to have sex with someone that really doesn't want to have sex with him. Also, part of it is because he wants to keep having sex with this person, and being a jerk will... I mean, this is just what I'm inferring.
Yeah,
but, it's just like a normal human response that most people would have. And it also, because of its ambiguity... it lets the story open up in more interesting ways, right?
Yeah, and so bringing it to Nora, having this kind of Amber Sweet is kind of the antithesis of how she sees herself. Amber Sweet is open and sexual, and it makes money off of sexuality, and is performative, and enjoys it. And she, because of her trauma, feels like she's in a prison of her sexuality. And so that mirror image of each other, and because they look like each other, gives it an interesting, dark side of the coin, like on which path could I have chosen kind of way. And it's her curiosity, her engagement, maybe just to understand, that leads her down a path of just it's sexual friendship, it's understanding.
How do you interpret that ending? How for her? 'Cause I'm very fascinated by that. I've been thinking about that a lot.
It might be, and it could be very symbolic. It could be more symbolic than it is, red-blooded, actual human beings engaging. It could be her ability to accept the other side of herself.
Yes, yeah. And also I read it as like, so basically they get together in a park and she kind of swoons and falls down and then says, "Kiss me," in a way that seems very like something from an old movie. Right?
Yeah, it does. Has some flourish.
And I've thought about different ways to interpret that. And I think the interpretation I've settled on is that, like, this is the first, just like, Amelie and Camille are taking the first step in one thing. The first step for her is actually, like, she is a case of arrested development, right? Because of this relationship with her uncle. And so we meet her when she's going to college with a bunch of younger people.
Even though she's older, she's about mentally where they are.
And I think, like, a lot of people who've been abused, she's had to hyper accelerate her growth in certain ways, be more adult. Like when you meet kids from troubled homes, they've often had to, like, become more mature than your years.
Yeah.
But that can lead to, like, arrested development in other ways because they have to skip a stage. And so what I see this is kind of like, it's some combination of her, like, learning to love herself and learning to love her sexuality with a kind of regression to adolescence to experience the kind of adolescent idea of love that she never was able to experience. Where you would have this idea of, like, swooning and saying, "Just kiss me. Just kiss me." That's a very, like, romantic young person's idea of, like, how a first kiss would go.
It's true. Yeah.
Right? So that's the way I read that. Right? Is like a kind of, because I want to have I like her and I want her to have a happy ending, because you could see this very dark, like, she can't love anyone but herself.
No, I don't think that's what they're saying.
It's funny because her last scene with Camille, she kind of purges maybe some sort of very adult sexual impulse, which was essentially just to dominate him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She comes in and she just dominates him, and then she's like, "I'm gone."
Yeah, it's pretty. And she's got some great. I mean, that's
cold-blooded.
Naomi, is it Naomi Merlant? She's in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is also a very sexual movie. Naomi Merlant. And she is quite an actress, and she's got some great moments. Not only that one, but, like, when she tells him off in the first place, like when he's ogling her over in the office. And
that was a great scene.
It's a great cut down, which again serves a wonderful dynamic of character between them, where he can bring it back up and use it as a joke, and it endears her to him, and the growth of their attraction and relationship makes sense. I mean, romantic and sexual relationships can be messy, and because of the illogic that follows it. And I think this movie understands the complexities that go into these dynamics, go into these kinds of relationships, and surveys them with an honesty that is rare, which is unfortunately rare. But then again, it makes something like this shine even brighter because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think it's interesting because that relationship also becomes a way for Camille to mature in certain very sort of interesting ways.
Yeah,
right? Because he's finally able to break through some barrier he had of just, he conceived of himself as someone who just, like, wanted to have sex.
Yeah.
But couldn't be in relationships.
Yeah.
And then he meets this person that he kind of does want to be in a relationship with, and it doesn't work. But it sort of breaks him of the idea that it has to be this way or that way. And that's really the maturation process for someone who has a very intellectualized worldview, is to, like, realize that you can't you can't constantly impose your intellectual will on yourself, right?
Yeah.
That like you have this idea of like I'm this kind of person who does this kind of thing.
He even says my frustration in the beginning. He's like, "Oh, my frustration." She asks him about his sex life, which seems very probing and very forward, but also I feel as though it feels very real, and how a lot of people do talk at this age, and getting to know each other. And he says, "Yeah, I use my work frustration or professional frustration into intense sexual activity."
Yeah, it's such a nerdy thing to say.
It is.
It's such a nerdy sort of attempt to rationalize something.
Mm-hmm.
Like because you're just someone, you're saying like I want to have sex, but I don't want to be in a relationship, which is a normal way to feel. But you can't just stop there. You have to have this account, which sort of romanticizes yourself, right? This romanticized account of, well, I just work so hard and then I just want to fuck, right? but it's totally, once again, it totally resonates with his character, who is someone who is not comfortable with ambiguity.
Yes.
And not comfortable with the sort of rawness of his feelings, which is why he's the one that ultimately gets overtaken by them,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And there's a very moving scene where he's trying and failing to collapse a wheelchair that belonged to his mother. And you can tell that the weight of that is just of giving up away her wheelchair is just, and it's harder for him to bear because he's not comfortable with his feelings. He sees himself as a person of the head and not of the heart.
Yeah.
And therefore the matters of the heart are difficult for him.
I mean, all of that comes into play. It is fascinating to see the exterior relationships and how they play psychologically and how they are venturing their own. The inability to venture the loss of his mother and how it has to culminate, and maybe that is a breaking point, for the floodgates to open up and try and because to hold back your emotions is an ordeal, a psychological ordeal for people.
It takes a tremendous toll.
And then you have someone like Amélie who cares so much that she tries to distance herself from it by getting someone to stay in the apartment, go visit her grandma, and is blamed that is sort of saying you didn't care, but she cared so much. And you see how it plays into her acceptance of knowing of not turning away from those feelings and to engage in them and embrace them.
No, you're right. I think that's a good way to think of them. Like for Amelie and Camille are really a good thesis antithesis pair, right? And the synthesis, because she's someone who feels things very immediately, right?
Yes.
And he's someone who's always very distant from his feelings. And it's like, and in the end, they do sort of meet each other in the middle, right? Because she's willing to be rational insofar as that she says, "Hey, look, this is the way I feel, and I'm not going to I'm not going to make an emotional, or like I'm not gonna like say like, oh, but I love you." She says like, "I love you. I want to be with you. If I can't be with you, I'm not gonna have this like."
Let's not pretend. Let's not do this anymore. So
she is able to take her feelings and come to a sort of rational conclusion, and he's able to acknowledge his feelings and meet her in the middle. So that is really good. Thesis antithesis, and that alone makes for a good story. But the insertion of Nora is interesting because it pulls the movie into some stranger territory that I think is ultimately.
But also, it shows a variety of what our world of sexuality and dealing with intimacy and our insecurities, and it makes a very beautiful tapestry there. And I think it's it's not a flashy movie, but it earns all of its wonderful character moments. It's very well written. It's very, very well conceptualized, and it's subtle and beautiful and shot in a very. It's black and white, but it's very sumptuous. It's it's very beautiful.
Well, it's always good to see a little black and white.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing that the insertion of Nora's character really captures well is that people's love lives and personal lives and romantic lives, especially in these weird middle periods where things are very unsettled, things that like seem superficially similar can actually be very different. Like, the underlying reality of what's causing you to like have these problems, or have these issues can just be so different person to person, even though the superficial, the top level experience is similar.
Yeah,
right. Which I think is another sort of subtly interesting thing about this movie.
Yeah.
The one other thing I would say about this movie, and we talk about this a lot, is that I do think it also does a better job of capturing like life at this particular moment because of the presence of computers and the presence of phones.
Yeah, the
and how
dating
phones
apps
and mediating are constantly coming in.
Yeah,
like
the technology, cam girls, dating apps. It's very oppressive.
It managed to weave that all through in a way that made it feel very current, without it being like about those things or some sort of commentary on those things. It just gave it a real air of realism, right? Like
it's embedded. Yeah. It's embedded in our lives in a way that you're right. It's not overt in our commentary. Like we're even though we talk or philosophize about them at times, there's such a naturalism to our engagement with dating apps, our naturalism to maybe the introduction to sex workers direct vis-a-vis to your life, and getting involved in that and seeing how all of that complicates the process that is already messy. It's just already messy. Human beings are messy and complicated, and so you're right. It's not overtly handled or commented on. It's just part of it. And
I think it weaves it in very well in a way that serves the story and also serves like a cinematic project that I'm always very interested in, which is like making movies that actually capture features of our contemporary moment, which they've generally not been great at.
No, definitely not. I mean, you turn. I mean, obviously this is foreign, so there would be more of an earnestness to tackle that, or a willingness to venture subject matter such as this. Versus, like what we talked about earlier is just the American project is kind of divided. And so you do get some people in the independent sphere and a kind of foreign sensibility to tackle these subjects. But it is hard. It's a harder thing to acknowledge without being, because you're right. Our modern moment is very complex and deserves some criticism, but I think people tend to veer towards the easy judgment of our time rather than tackling it head on and what does it mean and how do we handle it. And I think this movie does a very subtle job of venturing the actuality of the modern dating sphere, the what sexual connection means in our time, and how do we peruse that? How do we peruse ourselves in that project and venture? And that's it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It was a wonderful movie. I just finished it this morning before you came over, and as we talked about it, I walked away going, that was a very good movie. But I've only had an hour to kind of think about it. And now, discussing through it, I'm like, this is a wonderful movie.
This one will hang for a while, especially that Nora character and her storyline, because it's very ambiguous.
Yeah.
And I do think that ambiguity serves the movie well, because it adds this additional thread to a somewhat more conventional love story at the other end. Yeah.
It's very interesting. Very good movie. I'm glad we picked this. We almost did Riley Stern's Duel, because I was a big fan of his first movie, The Art of Self-Defense. But once I saw it, I did not want to subject Ben to it. It was a
There's a little capsule review for you right there.
There was a very unfortunate reinterpret. He's a very dry filmmaker. He's got a very deadpan sense of humor, and it worked so marvelously well in The Art of Self-Defense. Mostly because Alessandro Nivola is an incredible actor. He was incredible in it. Jesse Eisenberg works in that kind of sphere. And it worked, and I really liked it. And it had something to say about like toxic masculinity and the idea of defense and guns and our obsession with violence as men. And I liked that movie. And then I walked into Duel excited because of the concept. It's a sci-fi concept. Clones are made to appease families in death. But what ends up happening is the person who is dying doesn't end up dying, and then the clone utilizes a new amendment passed in America, which didn't make much sense to the concept of the film, because if there is an amendment that allows these clones to live and to have a sense of identity in themselves, basically it comes down to a duel that one of them has to die.
Just 2 minutes or one.
And again, as I describe it, it sounds like a very interesting concept in movie. The delivery is messy. It doesn't know how to articulate the deadpan to its heightened qualities. I think Karen Gillan is miscast. It is just an unfortunate one. Although 2 guys behind me in the theater were laughing so obnoxiously that I wanted to leave. I did not find even remotely the movie as funny as they did. They thought it was the funniest thing, I don't know, since Blazing Saddles.
So
I don't
obnoxious guys will like it.
Obnoxious
Everyone
guys
else
will like
avoid.
Yeah, and I didn't want to subject you. And I actually really liked this movie. This one I think will resonate with me through the year because of its visual potency, its wonderful, subtle, and real characterization. I thought this was a very good movie. It's not my favorite Jacques Audiard, but he's still great, and he knows how to make a very good movie. And I definitely recommend it. You can stream it on Amazon Prime. I mean, it's cheaper than going to the movies.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, and I mean, there's a few theaters I guess that have it probably, but
man, it was even when we were
Landmark
talking
has it.
about it, Landmark had it, and I couldn't find really a lot of times for it. It was I was a little depressed about that, but
sorry, buddy.
no, it's okay. It is what it is. But yeah, I think that's a good way.
I feel good about it.
I feel good. We're gonna be back next week. We're gonna do the Northman, Robert Eggers' Viking epic, and we're gonna do the Nicolas Cage meta Hollywood film, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I'll also be seeing Petite Maman, so maybe I'll throw in a little
give him
thing
a
at the end like I just did
give
there.
him a little capsule, a little quickie.
But yeah, I think that was good. Mr. Ben Thelen, he does Dead Reckoner Substack. You can go check out his writings, his recordings, and
Maybe something else, maybe some drawings.
Drawing,
soon, a
ooh.
little multimedia.
Ooh.
That's Kyle Bruehl. He does I Know Movies and You Don't. Yeah, we're great. You should keep watching our stuff. Like, subscribe, smash buttons below me.
Let's do it.
Smash them.
Smash it. We'll see you next time.